Hello my friends, I'm making this video in July 2024, and in the past few weeks I've learned a lot more about how zodiac signs are created. Yes, you heard that correctly. We have very compelling, you could say even convincing ideas of how zodiac signs are created. Most people are not aware of these theories, so in the title here I'm calling it the hidden basis of zodiac signs. It's only hidden because not a lot of people have paid attention to these new insights. And the way that zodiac signs are created is very intricate. It's very complex. It's not just like, oh, they're created like this and I can just tell you in one sentence. It's a very sophisticated, intricate system that creates zodiac signs. We've learned more of the intricacies of how they are created. So for those of you who want to understand the theory, the foundation, the basis of these things, I'm making this video to explain it in more detail. So these are relatively new discoveries made within the past decade of where zodiac signs come from, as I stated here on the slide, how Mother Nature creates zodiac signs, how zodiac signs are born out of the fundamental processes of nature. And what I'm proposing, and what I proposed, I think it was about 9 years ago when I released these ideas, is that it might sound crazy, absurd, insane, nuts, that astrology is a branch of physics. Oh, give me a break. It sounds a little bit nutty probably to most people, but there's very strong evidence, very compelling evidence. And one of the sources of evidence is in theory, the other is in research confirming certain relationships between celestial events and people's personality and behavior. So it was in 2015, so it's about 9 years ago. I uploaded a tutorial video on the extraordinary breakthrough. This breakthrough discovery of a compelling, perhaps you might call it convincing theory for why there are zodiac signs. And this theory, I'm just going to give a little background. This is explained in other videos. I'm going to give a little bit of background to where zodiac signs come from, and then I'm going to explain the new details that are discovered. But just to summarize, that in 2015, I started making videos about where zodiac signs come from, how they're created from fundamental forces in nature, and these discoveries were put together by several people working on these ideas, and it explains where both tropical zodiac signs and sidereal zodiac signs come from, and that they are a part of physical nature, and one day they will be confirmed by physicists because we have very strong evidence that they exist, and more details will be, should be discovered over time. Now, as I, as I mentioned before, not a lot of people have watched these videos gotten excited about them. I'm guessing that at the very, very most, perhaps a few thousand people have realized how significant this discovery is. And over time, more and more people realize, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So again, more details on the wondrous, intricate complexity of the way in which zodiac signs are created from fundamental forces have been discovered in the past few weeks. Let's learn about this awesome process of Mother Nature that creates zodiac signs. Now, a little bit more review. I think it's the next slide. I start heading into the new material. Where do zodiac signs come from? It's review in the sense that I have dozens of videos about this. You don't need to go back to those videos. I'm just going to review the concepts here. Number one, there's something called spin. Maybe you've heard about spin in quantum physics. Spin, you might say, is more properly called angular momentum. Spin is something fundamental to nature. Out of spin, I'm proposing zodiac signs are created. So spin, this angular momentum, exists in subatomic particles. The Earth, at a larger scale, the Earth has two kinds of spin. The Earth rotates on its axis, as you know, once a day. It revolves around the sun once a year. According to astrophysicists, those are the two types of spin, angular momentum, that the Earth has. Number three, as I just said, subatomic particles have spin. So there's this fractal relationship, this angular momentum existing at different levels, different scales. Even galaxies have a swirling effect in a galactic center around which they are revolving. So there's spin at all these levels. And so what we're going to guess, what we hypothesize, is that in this angular momentum, there are numbers embedded in it. These number sequences are embedded in spin. And then also there's a process of dimension reduction where the sphere collapses into great circles, and the spin has these number sequences, primarily Fibonacci numbers and prime number sequences embedded in it, and it creates structures in space. One of the structures in space, point number 5, is 12 divisions of 30 degrees. So the zodiac is structures in space generated out of spin, and this spin exists on the whole sphere, like the Earth spinning on its axis or revolving around the sun, and then there's a process of dimension reduction into these great circles. It's all explained in detail. You don't need to worry about the details here. I want to tell you about some cool new things that we realized about how zodiac signs are created, and you'll be able to follow this even if all this stuff about angular momentum seems a little vague at this point. And for those of you who are trained in science, this sounds very superficial. Watch the other videos, hours and hours of detailed information about this. Point number 6, the physical world reflects the patterns that we see here. So there's a self-similar fractal relationship where these are what we're seeing in this diagram are Fibonacci numbers. You're probably familiar with Fibonacci numbers, 0, and you see them around the edge here, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Those are the first few Fibonacci numbers. The next one after 8 is 13, but here they're put into a modulus function of 10, which means you subtract out 10. So instead of 13, we call it 3, and 8 plus 3 is 11. We subtract 10, we get 1. And this is a Fibonacci sequence put into a modulus 10. It's called a Pisano period. So this is Pisano period 10. There are 60 numbers. When you arrange the 60 numbers around a circle, you'll notice that you get these patterns. And if you'll have 5 numbers for each 30 degrees, because 5 times 12 is 60. And very interestingly, 0, there are 4 zeros. And if you insert these as zodiac signs, the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, begin with 0. The other signs begin with a 5. Those are the only signs that begin with 0 and 5. There's also a symmetry around 0 Aries, where on both sides of 0 Aries you see a 1. And then you see a 9 and a 1. 9 plus 1 equals 10, which is 0. So it alternates between being the same number and adding together to equal 10, which is our base, which is 0. Same thing happens around Cancer and Capricorn. We have these 7s, and then 3 plus 7 is 10, which is 0. Then we have 4s, we have 9 plus 1 is 10, which is 0. It alternates between being the same number and adding together to be 0 in Pisano 10. Beautiful, elegant symmetries. The declination of the sun, the distance of the sun from the celestial equator, is also symmetrical around Cancer Capricorn. So we see the similarity, not only in that these 12 divisions of 30 degrees exist, with an emphasis on the cardinal signs and secondarily the other signs, but we also see these symmetries that exist at the scale of the Earth going around the sun and the Earth spinning on its axis, as well as in the Fibonacci numbers. There's this very self-similar, very extremely similar patterning between this idea of zodiac signs and Pisano 10. And what I'm suggesting is that the zodiac signs are structures in space created out of Pisano periods embedded in spin. And there are many similar things that go on. Now, here's an interesting thing. Not only do you have 0, 5, 5, 0, 5, 5, 0, 5, 5, 0, 5, 5, that rhythm at the beginning of these structures in space that in ancient times were called zodiac signs and have been handed down to us. But also, if you go to the next number, instead of the starting number of each 30 degrees, you go to the next number, you have 1, 8, 9, 7. Well, let's apply the Fibonacci concept. This is not a Fibonacci sequence. Fibonacci sequence is 0, 1, 1, 2. But if we apply the concept of adding the two numbers, 1 plus 8 is 9. 8 plus 9 is 17, which in Pisano 10 is 7. And you can go all the way around the circle. And that will work. And in fact, these patterns that follow the Fibonacci logic of adding the last two numbers, but not beginning with 0, 1, 1, but beginning with two other numbers, they have been found in nature. I'm going to show you that later. They've been found in things like the arrangement of pineapples and pine cones and things like this. And they've given a name to this. It's called F8, Fibonacci 8. F8 is a variation of Fibonacci numbers where instead of beginning with 0, 1, 1, 2, you begin with 1, 8. So mathematically, Fibonacci 8 or F8 is a known mathematical construct, and Fibonacci sequences that begin with 1 and then some other number have been found in nature. And here we're seeing F8. The point here is that variations of Fibonacci numbers, such as F8, F4, which goes 1, 4, or F3, which starts 1, 3, these variations of Fibonacci numbers like F3, F4, F8, etc., they have a Fibonacci-like quality. Fibonacci is like the main one, and then there are these additional ones. They're almost like overtones. They're almost like variations on a theme. And amazingly, these variations on a theme are embedded in the zodiac. Now, I did mention this 1 plus 8 equals 9 and is going around in previous videos, but what I did not know at the time that I made those videos, most of them starting 9 years ago up to about 5 years ago, I didn't realize that that I have a name for it, F8, and that it is considered to be mathematically important. Gives a little more emphasis to the beauty and elegance of this pattern, in that you have the main Fibonacci sequence laid around the circle and creating variants of Fibonacci like F8. If we go to the next number, guess what we have? F3. It goes 1, 3. 1 plus 3 is 4. 3 plus 4 is 7. 4 plus 7 is going to be 11, which reduces to 1. It works all the way around. Interesting that these variants of the Fibonacci sequence are also embedded in this diagram of Pisano 10. It shows the beauty, intricacy, and complexity of these patterns. And if we go to the next number, oh, this is the best of all. This begins with 2, 1. In other words, I'm starting at the 1, 2, 3, fourth of the 5 numbers. If I start at the fourth of the 5 numbers in each section, I get 2, 1, 3, 4. Some of you who are mathematicians or very familiar with Fibonacci numbers, you might recognize it's the Lucas numbers, the Lucas sequence. The Lucas numbers are widely regarded as the second most important sequence, or you could say the most important of the variants of Fibonacci. the Lucas sequence. And they show up in nature. And they show up here. There it is, the Lucas numbers, embedded in zodiac signs. And you might have guessed that the last one also follows the Fibonacci way of adding two numbers. Excuse me. Here we have 3 plus 4 is 7, 4 plus 7 is 11, reduces to 1. This one does not appear to be as impressive as Lucas numbers and F8 and F3. Those are sometimes discussed as major variants of Fibonacci numbers mathematically. They appear in nature, as we will see. This one a little bit more odd, but however, this is interesting. The F8 sequence is in this last number. It just begins with the fourth section, which we're calling Cancer. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. If you go to Cancer, you'll see the 1. Let's see, where am I? If I go to Cancer, yeah, I'm on the last number. 1, 8. Oh, the purple. I've got it drawn right here. 1, 8. 1 plus 8 is 9. 8 plus 9 is 17. There's our F8, 1, 8. So we do have F8 in the last sequence. It just doesn't begin in Aries. We also have F3, begins in what I'm calling Pisces, this 12th section. 1, 3, 4, 7. And we also have the Lucas sequence, which begins back here in what we could call Aquarius, which is 2, 1, 3, 4, 7, etc. So all of these sequences, F3, F8, and Lucas numbers, are in this last sequence. In fact, they're in all of the sequences, because what's happening is that all of these sequences of numbers is this: 2, 1, 3, 4, 7, 1, 8, 9, 7, 6, 3, 9. You will find 2, 1, 3 somewhere in each one of these. And I've drawn them out. Like here's the red one, beginning in what astrologers would call Scorpio, in the 8th of the 12 sections. There's the Lucas numbers, 2, 1, 3. So what do I have? The Lucas numbers in red. So here's another Lucas numbers. That's the one I showed you before, and so on. In blue, I've numbered them. Or let's take the purple. They're all over here. The purple are the F3. No, they're F8. 1, 8. Where are we here? 1, 8, 9, etc. Here's another one. 1, 8. I just did the first two because there's so many. 1, 8, 1, 8, 1, 8. So here are Lucas numbers 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And the blue is another sequence. That looks like it's the F3. Yeah, that's the F3. There's so many, the overlap is difficult to see. But the point is simple. All of these sequences, whether we start on the first one after the division, we start here, with this one or this one or this two, they all are the sequence 2, 1, 3, 4, 7, 1, 8, 9, 7, 6, 3, 9, just starting in different places. So they all have F3, F8, and Lucas embedded in them somewhere. It's just an amazingly simple and elegant patterns. What's also kind of shocking here is that you take the Fibonacci numbers, you put them in a modulus function, and you end up with these repeating beautiful patterns. It's like, wow, the scientific proof of this gets extremely complicated. It's not something that we naturally expect. Like, why the heck is Pisano 10 making these simple, elegant patterns when put around a circle in 12 sections of 30 degrees. It's mysterious, it's beautiful, it's extraordinary. And we're just learning more and more ways in which these intricate patterns occur. So conclusion, The number sequences in Pisano 10 that create the zodiac are the Fibonacci sequence. You put the Fibonacci numbers around, and you see these patterns, like the zeros at the beginning of cardinal signs, 5 at the beginning of the other zodiac signs, and also starting with other numbers, like instead of the first, the second, third, fourth, or fifth number in a sequence, you get F3, F8, and Lucas numbers. They're a secondary factor creating the zodiac. What I didn't know before is that we have names for these sequences, F3, F8. I knew about Lucas numbers, but I hadn't noticed, oh my God, one of the sequences is the Lucas numbers. You have the Fibonacci numbers and variants of Fibonacci numbers, all creating 12 sections of 30 degrees. And by the way, note that since all of these add together, that if you take the code for the first 30 degrees, which we'll call Aries, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, there's a 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, and you add that to 5, 8, 3, 1, 4, you get 5, 9, 4, 3, 7, which is the third section of Gemini, 5, 9, 4, 3, 7. That's kind of obvious when you realize that all of these add together. I kind of overlooked that. I think I noticed it at one time. Maybe I forgot. I don't know if I ever noticed it. I was talking to my colleague Linda Berry, and we're talking about these sequences, and she said, well, Aries plus Taurus equals Gemini. And I went, oh my God, of course it does, because that's what we just said. Fascinating how each 30-degree section is built on the previous two, just like the Fibonacci numbers. Taurus plus Gemini equals Cancer. It's just that Fibonacci way of adding the last two numbers is so deeply ingrained in these 12 sections of 30 degrees. Amazing. With the Pisano and with 3 variations, the Lucas, F3, and F8, all embedded in this sequence. So there it is mathematically. Very pretty. Does this show up in nature? Where does it show up? I mean, yes. The latest research on pineapples shows that pineapples have variants of Fibonacci numbers. So what we're seeing in nature is Fibonacci numbers are in nature. You probably know that. If you've been, interested in Fibonacci numbers at all, they're embedded in things in nature. What's interesting is the variants are also embedded and often in the same thing, in the same pineapples. Let me show you. There's a pineapple. Yay, pineapple. There it is. So we see a pineapple, the picture on the top. On the left is the scales. They're called, technical term is trichomes. These little bumps, they're called trichomes. If you count those trichomes along a row, you'll see that they are Fibonacci numbers. Here's a pineapple where we're looking at the top of it, and then towards the bottom, you counting all the way down, there are 8 trichomes in this row. 8 is a Fibonacci number. There it is. 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. If you count the number of these bumps, scales, better term trichomes, if you count them, they will be Fibonacci numbers. Now, I read that a long time ago, but the latest research shows that some pineapples, they can be the same species of pineapple. Most of them are arranged with Fibonacci numbers. Most of them have the trichomes of Fibonacci numbers, but not all of them. Some of them have F4, where the number of trichomes is 1, 4, 7, etc. And usually it'll start at like 5. So the first few numbers aren't there. There'll be 5 trichomes, 8, but instead it follows the F4 sequence. Another odd thing that happens, odd to me because I always thought pineapples those trichomes are arranged in Fibonacci numbers is sometimes it's what they call F2X. Instead of 5, 8, 13, you double the number. 10, 16, 26, 42, 64. What I'm saying is that people took pictures of pineapples, very thorough pictures, and they carefully count these trichomes, the rows of trichomes. They go to the left and they go to the right. You can follow this swirling thing to the left, or you can follow it swirling to the right. You just count them. And they're not all in Fibonacci sequences. Some are F4, some are F2 times, F2x, and some are one more than a Fibonacci number. So instead of being 5, 8, 13, it's 6, 9, 14, right? 5 plus 1 is 6, 8 plus 1 is 9, 13 plus 1 is 14, so it would be 6, 9, 14, 22, 35. It's just the way it is. It's just an observation. And some have one less. And I'll show you the research results. Here are the research results. I give the website address at the bottom. And what I did is I rearranged this table. I put blue borders around it and red borders, and I reorganized it to what I think is a little more readable for my purposes here. And I put these little red arrows. What this research is showing, again, there's the website to go to if you want to read the actual paper. What it's showing is there were 4 studies of pineapple trichomes. People just counting how many trichomes there are. Tedious job. You're just counting them. And then it's really easy to get mixed up, and they usually have several people count them to make sure they agree. So in one study, there were 100 pineapples. This number at the bottom, any, 100. That's the number. Oh, no, that's the percent. Here's the total number. This one had 768 pineapples. That's a lot of pineapples. 768 pineapples were looked at. This one has even more, 1,281. This has only 319, and this was a smaller study of 140. And what did they find? What they found is that the percent of pineapples that have the trichomes arranged in Fibonacci numbers in one study was 74%, the other 64, the other 82, the other 95. Somewhere between 64% and 95%. That's about 80% on average. So we could say, although these are larger studies, just ballparking it, somewhere between 70 and 90% of pineapples are in Fibonacci numbers. What I had always read is all of them are. Well, careful research shows 70 to 90% are in Fibonacci sequences. What are the others? About 3% on the Fibonacci times 2. I just showed you that with Fibonacci times 2. About 5 to 14%, let's call it 6 or 7%, are Lucas numbers. Wow, it's the most common variant. Maybe not surprising if you're a mathematician, because Lucas numbers are mathematically closely tied to Fibonacci numbers. They're like a variation on the idea. But that nature actually follows that is rather amazing. That Pisano 10 puts an emphasis on Lucas numbers. Whoa. So a lot of similarities here. 3 things are similar. The Pisano 10 has Lucas numbers embedded in it. The pineapples, about 5-6% or so, something like that, are arranged in Lucas numbers. And mathematically, if you do proofs of the relationship of things, you see that there are mathematically a lot of connections between Lucas numbers and Fibonacci numbers. And F4. Now, in Pisano 20, we didn't see F4. We saw F3 and F8. But what we're seeing is that starting a Fibonacci series with 1, the number 1 and any other number, is important. With pineapples, it's F4. Only about 1% of pineapples. Very rare. And in this table, they're considering all of these to be Fibonacci sequences. So what's a Fibonacci sequence and what isn't, can be a little ambiguous. But what's not ambiguous is to call these variants. These are variants or variations of Fibonacci. And the pure Fibonacci is the 0, 1, 1. So they're all in the Fibonacci class, you could say. And then they're calling the -1 and +1. They're not Fibonacci, but a good number of pineapples, about 6%, 7% here, none. A few percent are Fibonacci -1, a few percent are Fibonacci +1, and then there's about maybe 10, 12% that cannot be classified yet. We don't know what they are. That's interesting. Maybe there's some other sequence if we keep studying and analyzing. Interesting. The point is that there's a great similarity between Pisano 10 and what we see in pineapples. Extreme similarity. Lucas numbers and variants of other variants of Fibonacci numbers. Amazing similarities. And by the way, a similar result was found for pine cones, where 95% of pine cones in a particular study, here's the website address for this study, 95% were Fibonacci. Pine cones also have, arranged in Fibonacci numbers. 4% were Lucas, and they're calling the 1% not properly formed. They're assuming that the cone just didn't get fully developed. Wow, so again, Lucas numbers as an important variant showing up in nature. So the latest research shows that these variants of Fibonacci numbers show up in nature. It's not just the Fibonacci numbers. So a lot of times you'll read, Fibonacci numbers, that pine cones, pineapples, they're a range of Fibonacci numbers. The latest research shows they could be Lucas numbers, not always the 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, etc. Could be the 2, 1, 3, 4, which is the Lucas sequence. Very, very interesting what we're learning about the details of how Pisano 10 creates these 10 structures in space also appear in nature. Okay, I'm going to summarize here, and I will pick up with this video in a part 2. I'm already at over a half hour. Well, you know what? I'll do this summary at the beginning of the next half hour. Okay, I like to break it up into half-hour segments. Let's stop here. I'll see you in part 2. Thank you for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.